Let's turn to Joe Ryrie, who's the co-founder and director of Smartphone Free Childhood Campaign Group. Joe, good morning.
Morning.
There you go, the first ever study, and it says that there is no link between banning smartphones in schools and lower incidence of mental health problems, anxiety or depression.
Yeah, well, these are certainly somewhat surprising results, given that I think it's now becoming sort of widely accepted among teachers, education unions, and the wider educational establishment that the kids having access to smartphones during the school day is detrimental for their ability to focus, for safeguarding, for behaviour, for students' mental health as well. And we've got hundreds of teachers in our network who've made the move to make their own school smartphone free, and unanimously they say that doing so is transformative for their students' well-being, for teachers' daily lives, and for the overall school environment as well. And I think but the really interesting thing in this report is that the headline that's being picked up is around school smartphone bans and whether or not they're effective. But actually, the report concludes that this issue is much bigger than removing smartphones from schools. This is a critical societal issue that requires urgent attention from parents, from schools, and from government, which we would wholeheartedly agree with.
But if there is this kind of movement, if you say there's lots and lots of teachers, there's obviously a huge number of parents part of your movement. Do you need legislation? I mean, is a change in our society going to arise from legislation of the kind that they've used in Australia? Or do you need the sort of soft stigma of social pressure and the sort of social convention in schools to be that it's okay for teachers to feel that they can enforce this in their schools without the need for legislation?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And ultimately, we think that there is far tougher regulation is going to be needed to make the social media platforms safer and non-addictive for kids, because at the moment, these I think the other really stark statistic in this report is that of the 1,200 participants, 1,200 students, the average daily time students spend on their smartphone was 4 to 6 hours. And that's a terrifying amount of time for children to spend scrolling and swiping. And it's the crux of why this movement has caught fire. So we've got 200,000 parents who've joined this movement in the last 12 months, because parents everywhere are saying, we need to change something. We need to change something now. And I don't want my kids to be spending their life on their smartphones. I don't want their childhood to be mediated by these addictive algorithms made by the most powerful companies on the planet. But so regulation needs to be part of the solution ultimately. But if you're a parent of the child today, you don't have time to wait for 5 or 10 years for government to fix this, because it's going to be too late. So the simplest solution by far is just to wait a few more years to give our kids smartphones and cut the problem off at the source. But the problem is that it's almost impossible to do it on our own.
Yeah, because of the other kids, right? The other kids at school who've got one, and then your kid misses out.
Yeah, exactly. So that, particularly at the transition to secondary school, which is a big sort of crunch point when all children start getting smartphones. I think it's 89% of 12-year-olds have their own smartphone. And that's exactly the age when you want your kids to have more independence. You want them to make new friendships. So that's partly why we set up something called the Parent Pact. That's an online tool where parents can go on and pledge to delay giving their own child a smartphone. The idea being that you can then see how many other kids in your school or class have done the same thing. The idea being that if we act collectively and we act together, then the peer pressure reduces and it becomes much easier. So for the moment, we've got to take matters into our own hands, but ultimately, yes, there needs to be much better regulation.
Well, but I'm afraid the story of regulation of technology in Western democracies is not a happy one. It's not a shining example of effective policy making. And so in the short term, if there are parents listening to this right now saying, I desperately need some sort of public and social support for taking a smartphone away from a child or not giving them one in the first place, you're saying it's going to come about through social networks much more than it's going to come about through legislation.
Yeah, I think we're optimistic that the sort of regulatory picture will change eventually, but absolutely, right now it's about coming together and creating change ourselves, and this is happening. Like, parents across the country have joined this movement in the past year. We've got this Parent Pact that I mentioned. There are WhatsApp groups, Smartphone Free Childhood WhatsApp groups in every single county in Britain that are thriving. People are coming together to take action, meeting other parents who feel the same as they do about this issue. And we're going to work together to try and create change on the ground.
Okay.
And if there's enough of a groundswell of parents who believe in this, and there really, really is, that's demonstrated by the numbers who are joining this movement, then we think that perhaps optimistically, the politicians and the tech companies will
eventually take notice. We've got to leave it there. Joe Ryrie, co-founder of Smartphone Free Childhood. Thank you.